starting a new topic, topic 4, which is all about transoceanic connections. Okay, and we're starting with the technological innovations that allowed for those transoceanic connections. Okay, for those of you who are not necessarily sure what's going to be covered in this topic, well, if you were waiting for colonization efforts, this is where it's happening, right? Okay, so they kind of start talking about some stuff here at the beginning that we're going to get into a little bit more. But one thing I do want to talk about is demographic pressures. Okay, and so specifically demographic pressures in Europe, right? So we have a couple things here going on, right? We have food struggles as population grows, right? So that's kind of the key thing that's causing these demographic problems. We have some food struggles, right? Some poor harvests can lead to some famines, right? The primogeniture laws that are prominent in Europe, right? The concept that the eldest son inherits all the land and wealth, is causing the younger sons, right, to need to find some land, and then on top of that, we also start to see religious minorities look for a new place to settle. And frankly, most of Europe, if you're a religious minority, chances are you're a religious minority somewhere else as well, right? So it makes it really tough for them to necessarily find somewhere within continental Europe or England, right? And so these all lead to this kind of desire, to find new land, right? To find new places to live. Okay, and that's one of those that kind of helps lead us into our shift here, right? And so let's kind of talk about the developments of transoceanic travel and trade. Okay, so we start to see in the 16th century, so in the 1500s, we see the Europeans become more prominent in the Indian Ocean trade network as we see technological developments that allow them to do so, and then also more demand for luxury goods, right? They talk about the two motives, right? The quest to find wealth, and then convert people to Christianity. Okay. However, they're not alone, right? There's tons of people in the Indian Ocean, but the one group that they really wanted to point out is the Omani Kingdom. Okay. Right. They are a Middle Eastern kingdom. And they are kind of a big rival of the Europeans, especially the Portuguese, right? Leading to this thing called the Omani European rivalry for control over the Indian Ocean. Excuse me. And so we see. All right. So we see this as a fight over controlling the Indian Ocean, and this is one of the reasons that we see Columbus start to look for a new route. Right. And so we start to see the Columbian voyages, right? The voyages of Columbus kind of make the Europeans as this kind of middleman between the Americas and Africa and Europe. This middleman is kind of international trade network, our first international trade network. They're kind of jumping the gun here a little bit. We haven't necessarily talked about Columbus even getting there yet, but we will get there, of course. So from the Americas, right? From the Americas, they get especially sugar, tobacco, and rum. Kind of not new luxuries, especially sugar, but tobacco and rum definitely become kind of major luxuries. Rum is, of course, made from sugar, right? From Africa, of course, we see the development of the slave trade, right? And then from Asia, they start to get things like silk and spices. They talk about rhubarb, but I'm not going to focus too much on that. And so because of this, right, because of these things, we see the creation of European trade empires. and there are quite a few. Spain, kind of the first major one. Well, not actually. I take that back. Portugal's probably the first major one, especially in the Indian Ocean. Great Britain will probably become the most powerful of them. France and Holland, also known as the Netherlands, will all become trade empires in one part of the world or another, or across the entire world, right? This is mostly done by men, but they do talk about women in Southeast Asia being in charge of kind of all this trade. Okay. So we have, so now let's kind of talk about the major technologies, right? And so we start to see the Europeans are able to kind of combine a lot of traditions together and a lot of technologies together from different societies. Okay, they talk about, the Greek use of the stars. They talk about well, that's really what they talk about here. They don't necessarily point out these specific ones, but we'll get into those here in a second. In the leading European figure in the development of exploration is not an explorer, but rather kind of the political leader that promotes exploration, and that is Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal. Okay, so he is kind of responsible for creating a lot of the first policies that lead to and financing the first expeditions, but in the first policies, right, to help promote exploration, right? He finances exploration of the African coast, the West African coast, and eventually the East African, and then around the Cape of Good Hope. Okay, and so kind of combined with the scientific revolution, right? We see a lot of advances during this time that we can help exploration and sailing a lot. And so we start to see some things that they talked about that I'm not going to go into too much. They talk about Newton with gravity and predicting the kind of the sea level, right? Being able to do that, direction and intensity of winds, right? But one of them is cartography, right? The technology of map making, essentially, right? And so they started to use astronomical charts, which help them guide their way to their destination, right? Especially before the compass, right? And so, but then we also see a lot of development in equipment, right? We have, of course, the stern rudder, which comes from China. We've talked about that a lot, so I'm not going to focus too much, but that allows for better navigation, right? The Astrolabe, which was improved by Muslims in the 12th century. It was originally Greek, but the Muslims improved upon it. That is about how far north or south they are. Okay. But obviously the magnetic compass being probably the biggest development for exploration. They originally wasn't magnetic, but we see the magnetic compass work with the magnetic fields at the North and South Pole, right? Especially the North Pole, right? The lateen sail, again, which we've talked about quite a bit. The magnetic compass mostly comes from China as well. The lateen sail by Arab sailors in the Indian Ocean. Okay, this allowed for, so basically the triangular sail that allowed for usage of winds even when the wind wasn't necessarily going in your direction, right? Not necessarily against you, right? But when it's on the side, kind of hitting from the side, you can use it, the triangular sail, to get where you want to go, right? And then we also see the lateen sail combined with the square sail, right, which also allowed for strong use of back winds, right, winds that are at your back, right, which are good, right, which really allows for this exploration into large oceans, right. We also have some new ships that they bring up that we do need to know a little bit about, the Carrack, the Caravelle, and the Flute, or the Flute. I believe it's just the Flute, though. right? And so you see, especially the Caravelle, right, used for long distance voyages, using mostly lateen sails, right? But we also see the Carrack use square and lateen sails, and the Flute is going to use square sails only, mostly just for trade to get in one direction, right? So yeah, the long-term results of all this, right, is that we see a rapid expansion of global trade due to these technologies. Okay. The only place that we don't really see exploration at this point, and we will eventually, or not even necessarily exploration, but unification into the global trade network, is going to be in Polynesia, right? We also see the introduction of gunpowder, right, from China. Really helps the Europeans conquer other people. Not to say the other people don't have gunpowder weapons, but the Europeans used it better. But then we also, of course, have sea pirates using cannons as well. They talk about the Dutch sea beggars, right? Okay, so we see they talk about the interactions inside of outside of Africa, bringing new technology. I'm not going to focus too much on that. And then they talk about Peter the Great utilizing European technology and to for exploration. I'm not going to talk too much about that either. That seems just kind of offhand. But yeah, that's a quick little section there. The kind of technologies. These are the main ones down here. Right, the stern rudder, Astrolabe, compass, lateen sails, probably the big ones, and then they kind of manifest into these ships right here: the Carrack, the Caravelle, and the Flute. But yeah, that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you.